ultimately, Garrett, believe it or not, we're a participation agency. When we got into this space, football was going the other direction. And we felt like if we could, teach coaches how to practice safely, that we could add a lot more players to their team and their roster and help, revitalize the game and increase their participation.
Welcome to Sponsorable, a podcast that brings together sports organizers and brand leaders to talk about the business of grassroots sports. I'm Garrett Shea, and I've spent the last 20 years in the youth sports industry, where I built nationally televised sporting events and corporate sponsorship programs. I created this podcast to bring in experts from the sports industry and have them share what they do in the space and why they do it. My guest today is going to talk about being an entrepreneur in the sports industry and how he's built his business. Please welcome founder and CEO of GameBreaker, Mike Juels. Mike, hey, thanks for coming on to Sponsorable. It's great to have you on.
Oh, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
All right. So I'd love to just jump in. You're kind of a longtime entrepreneur. You've built a great business in the sports industry. You've jumped into a brand new product category, and you've successfully built up a national and even international business. I'd love to just kind of start off with how'd you get into the sports industry?
Yeah, I think it's a long story, but I'll cliff note it for you. Basically, always been a big sports guy, grew up playing sports, and as an adult, coached sports, specifically football, and really, saw a void in safety and saw an opportunity to engage in the sport and make a difference. And so we jumped in.
And for those of the listeners that aren't probably as aware of your company, GameBreaker, maybe just give a quick overview of what is GameBreaker, what's the mission, what are kind of some of the products and customers that you serve?
Yeah, GameBreaker in its simplest form is the inventor and pioneer of the soft shell headgear space, products that were produced and manufactured to protect athletes, either on days when they weren't in full pads in football or in supposed non-contact sports. We really cut our teeth in football. I think the beginning of our product was days that you weren't in full pads, and that kind of spun off into 7-on-7 and flag football. Now, several years later, we've added several other verticals. We are in rugby, we are in surfing, cheer, go down the list, wrestling. So a lot of sports, but mainly our focus was football, and that's really where we got our start. From that standpoint, we're the only company in our space, in the soft shell space, that sells into the NFL. Both our headgear and shoulder pads are in locker rooms around the league. At the NCAA level, the same is true. You'll find us, whether it's the Ohio States or the UCLAs or the Oregons or the Florida States or the Notre Dames. You'll find our products. And then at the high school level, we're probably 70-80% of the Max Preps top 100. So again, when schools are in off season or are in days where they're not wearing full pads, you'll find our products from the Mater Days and the De La Salles and the Bishop Gormans and you name it. We're mandated at the Texas high school level for the 7v7 association. So anyone who plays 7-on-7 at the high school level in the state of Texas wears our product, something we're very proud of. And then trickling down from there, flag football obviously right now is kind of at a boiling point and showing significant growth, especially in the women's side. And so you will find us in flag leagues all over the country. We're mandated at most, or it's a lot of them, I should say, around the league. And then, and from a 7-on-7 standpoint, probably the top five major 7v7 organizations also require GameBreaker headgear as a part of their equipment offering, and require the athletes to wear them for safety reasons. And so, that's our footprint in football. And then, internationally, we are in soccer and rugby in a big way. And that's continuing to grow and be a vital market for us.
Right. Well, and once again, thanks to Mike for jumping on Sponsorable, the podcast about the business side of grassroots sports. Make sure you like and subscribe so you can continue to get great information about the business side of grassroots sports. So, Mike, obviously, the GameBreaker headgear, I mean, it is truly a trailblazer. There was no such thing as headgear for football prior to GameBreaker coming out. I still remember, you see my Rutgers helmet behind me. I played college football at Rutgers and Ohio State. And I mean, there were so many days that we just went helmets, and you got that big clunky helmet, no pads, running around, doing, Fast Friday practice, or you're doing your walkthroughs. And it is amazing. I look back to high school as well. In high school, 7-on-7 was nothing, right? You were playing 7-on-7 competitions, high speed, big kids, moving fast, over the middle with no sort of headgear. So clearly you identified, hey, there's a big problem in football, and it's a problem that's tied to the equipment. And how are we making sure that, when we're not, when we're not going full speed and or when we're not going full pads, we have other options. And especially, I think back to, the Bill Walsh days, and how he was so, focused on practicing fast, but practicing really without contact, and making sure that the athletes were healthy to come to game day and they were at top health. And that's where every time I think of GameBreaker, I think of, Coach Walsh and that mantra of, you got to practice fast, but you gotta protect your teammates. And I look at GameBreaker and say, man, now that is a great invention product for for the evolution of football. And clearly, I think we're seeing it today, as you noted: flag, youth, tackle, high school, and then college and pro. So, and when you first created this idea, I mean, I'm sure people said, "Hey, Mike, this is crazy, right? Like what are you trying to do? Like, you're trying to create a new product where did people need it? Did they buy into it?" I'm sure you had some uphill battles early on.
Absolutely. um, Certainly one of those stories where people see you and think, wow, it's an overnight success story. Far from that.
So
Luckily,
when did you start? When did you actually come up with the idea for the GameBreaker headgear, and then when did you actually launch it?
yeah, it was a long time. The original patent dates back to 2001. So a long way before people were talking about, head injuries in sport, especially football. The spotlight hadn't yet shone on it, but being a former football player and coaching football, I certainly saw that this was happening, that these injuries were occurring. And in my old world, I owned an agency, and in that agency, one of our policies was kind of, questions of the answer, diagnose the problem and prescribe a solution. And in 2011, when we decided actually to, maybe turn this into a business, at that time it was a philanthropic play. I was bringing in product, donating it to socioeconomically challenged communities and programs. And quite honestly, most of the time I gave it to them, they didn't know what it was or what to do with it, right? I mean, the problem with inventing a new product, in this case, is that we had to pioneer the space, to your point. People weren't wearing it. They didn't know what to do with it. They didn't, have any clue what it was for. And yeah, they looked at me like I was crazy. And so certainly in the early days, kind of being the first one over the wall, first, took a lot of bullets. There's no doubt about it. And that was, from, the every direction. I mean, whether it was, wholesalers or retailers or us trying to find people to sell the product. Um, yeah, there was just a lot of confusion. And so in 2011, we decided to go to market. I think we spent about 5 years going back and, different iterations. I think in the first 6 years of business or 7 years in business, we maybe had 5 different iterations. So we were, tweaking it, making it better, finding labs that could test it and give us feedback. And without having a sampling of players to be able to do that, that was certainly difficult. But I think the conversations, uh, Garrett, were great in that it seemed to be to us the higher the level that we spoke, the more it was accepted, right? We thought it would be the opposite. People originally said, well, maybe you'll get some flag football players to wear it, but no one in the NFL is ever going to put that thing on their head. I think the opposite ended up happening. The more experience the coach had, the longer he had been in the game, the more that he saw fit. I mean, at the NFL level, I remember like yesterday, my first, meeting in an NFL locker room and kind of showing them the technology first. And they fell in love with the technology. And then they're like, that's great. What do you do with it? And I pulled this helmet out of my bag and, the room, broke into silence. And everyone looked at me like, what are we supposed to do with that? And, and the coach, asked me and I said, well, let me ask you a few questions and then, I'll answer your question if that's okay. And so those three questions were, coach, number one, every rule change that's happened in football in the last 10 years, kind of what have they been about? And it was head injuries, right? And then we kind of boiled that down, like, what about head injuries? And it was really, let's not have the helmet become a weapon, right? Let's de-weaponize the head, if you will. And so we all agreed on that. And then the second thing I said was, coach, what's the number one thing you guys are yelling during practice? And we all settled on stay up, right? If you've ever been around a college football field or an NFL field or a high school football field, you hear coaches yelling stay up quite a bit. And I said, why stay up, coach? And he said, well, when guys go to the ground, bad things happen. And I remember saying, well, if I had $1 for every coach that's ever said that, I wouldn't be here. Like, what specifically bad happens? And they said, well, guys get rolled up on, but also they're taking, helmets to the knees and, different appendages, and it's causing injury. And I said, last question, coach, like how many times in a helmet only practice has your quarterback finished a throw and hit his hand on a helmet and or face mask and required time off and or surgery? And the coach said countless. And I remember saying, coach, I guess my last question is, doesn't it seem a little counterintuitive to you that the most dangerous piece of equipment you own, you wear on days with no protection from it? And I think that's kind of that aha moment. And they looked at me and said, like, how fast can we get him here? Right. In this case, it was an NFL program, and the quarterback had, had a lot of those injuries, and they had lost a lot of people in non-padded practices, and it just, the timing seemed to be right. And so early adoption came at the highest level, and, places like Texas, where football is king, where people said, oh, they're never going to wear it. They were the first not only to gravitate towards it, they were also the first to mandate and the biggest believers. So that's been a real welcome surprise for us. Um,
And that's at the, just for those that are listening, that's at the high school governing body for Texas high school football, especially for 7-on-7. And that's what amazes me is like I still remember when I was running a number of programs for USA Football, and Merrill Hodge was a great supporter. The great former Pittsburgh Steeler. And he'd come out to the events and he'd say, hey, Garrett, you have these high school kids doing 7-on-7, but they got nothing on their head. And I said, well, Merrill, all of these different states have different rules and regulations. Some won't ever let you put on a helmet. And he was talking like a hard shelled helmet. Others say you can't do 7-on-7 without a helmet. And it started to get me thinking, man, like you have 50 different states, all have different rules. They try to govern 7-on-7 in the off season. And like, this is a great example of how Texas, who is probably the best organized and does the best job with their high school sports, is ahead of the curve, saying, hey, we're like, we believe that 7-on-7 is a really important skill development competition and exercise for kids to get game like reps. But we also know that there's a lot of injuries that happen in 7-on-7. We don't believe you should put a hard shelled helmet on. So what are the alternatives? And you're kind of in the right place at the right time, and you get the biggest high school football state in America to basically mandate and say, we need every single player that's going to play 7-on-7 to wear GameBreaker headgear. And I saw it like, that's one of the great, I don't know, case studies, if you would, when you're launching a product, right? And you kind of talked about it. You have so many different, as the owner, founder, CEO of GameBreaker, you're dealing with the product. You're dealing with the rollout of a new product and new category, if you would, the education, the sales, the marketing. I mean, you have all of these different things that you have to oversee, and probably a lot of them you're doing yourself as a startup. Back in 2011, as you're kind of rolling this thing out. But the fact that you're able to get Texas on board, and then at the level is truly true. That to me is like, wow, that's what a great moment.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. They've been a great partner. They've been great for the game, not just in Texas, but around the world. I mean, people look to them. They're the only state that has a real organized, coaches association and their own, trade show and education platform and coaches school, and they're certainly the most organized. And they just do a fabulous job. And our tag.
And real quick, Mike, for those of our listeners who don't understand, like high school sports is pretty complex. To your point, you've got the coaches association, you've got the governing body or the high school state association, which in Texas is called the UIL. You've got a lot of different folks that are have oversight. And at some point, like, what's that process to to get alignment and support from? And then, of course, you got all the individual coaches at some point that definitely have a lot of power, especially a state like Texas. What's that process like?
Well, it's a it's a tough road to navigate, certainly. I mean, and you're absolutely right. You have, governing bodies, you have state associations, you have then independent coaches associations, and then you have, in Texas's case, like the UIL. In Texas, there's another one, which is the Texas High School 7v7 Association. It's actually a sanctioned sport in Texas, and they have a state championship in and around 7-on-7. So there's a lot of moving parts. I think for us, the best way to navigate it has always been to really not politicize the product and the process, and really just to keep everybody laser focused on not being right, but doing the right thing, right? And making sure that these athletes, are protected. The one thing to keep in mind is this is practice, right? This is an off-season product. It's about getting better. We never wanted to do anything that would hurt football. Actually, we were doing something to help the game, to increase numbers, to help with participation, as we saw those numbers declining several years back, and kind of become that participation agency. And so really it was to keep everyone laser focused on, the kids. Our tagline and motto is protect the player, protect the game. And, we've seen in a lot of sports where rule changes have been made that have changed the game fundamentally, how it was played, because of a safety issue, right? You look at, soccer in the USA with women and the banning of headers, right? It's a Band-Aid, right? We're having a problem. Girls are having concussions. We're going to ban headers. For girls under a certain age, they ban them. And then the epidemiology is released for, the last 25 years of high school women's soccer. And they find out, yeah, head injuries are the number one injury in the sport, but only about 18% of them come from heading the ball, right? The other 82% come from playing soccer. And now you've banned, headers, which means corner kicks are not a part of the game, and you've changed the whole game fundamentally. We just didn't want that to happen with football. We wanted to keep it in its purest form and allow athletes to continue to play and grow and develop. And as being in and around sports and being a college athlete yourself, the percentage of these kids that go on to, make a living doing this is very, very small. They're going to end up being doctors and lawyers and educators and firemen and policemen and having a ton of concussions in their belt and a lot of head injuries and, TBIs and, subconcussive impacts along the way really isn't a healthy, successful recipe for the rest of their life. And so, um, we have to care for the kids. And luckily, Garrett, to your point, I had sold another business and, I didn't need to, sell helmets to make a living. And so I was able to really stay the course. But I think early on, obviously, if we were a typical startup, I would have starved to death and, closed the doors and we wouldn't be here today. So yeah, it certainly was a long road. Um, uh, the objections come from every direction for a lot of different reasons. And, luckily through science, we've been able to, debunk that and correct them.
Yeah, and as I saw it, I know I certainly followed GameBreaker since its inception. Really seen the progress and the evolution, and I noted, especially early on, and one of the better moves I saw from a marketing standpoint was, you start off in safety equipment for kids is like, it's so hard for me to get my kid to wear a bicycle helmet, right? But the best thing was all of a sudden you started putting their team different colors, right? So now I can, if I'm playing for Rutgers, my soft shell helmet looks just like my Rutgers football helmet. It's got, it's red, it's got the Rutgers logo on the side. And so now it's part of my uniform as opposed to, just kind of a black shell or a bicycle helmet, if you would. Like it's got, it's making it part of the uniform. I thought was a great piece. And it's not, for those that are like, oh well, of course that makes a whole lot of sense. Like, of course they did it, but it's not it's a great idea, but it's also the execution of it. Like anytime you're putting, you're changing colors, you're putting additional things onto any sort of safety equipment, that how's it impact the testing? How's it impact the safety, the safety protection? And so there was a number, I'm sure, of challenges there, but that was one that I said, wow, like now they're making it part of the uniform. And that was, certainly a great moment, I thought, for GameBreaker.
Yeah, certainly. That's a big part of what we do. You won't find our logo splashed across any of our products. Really, we want to be an extension of our customers and their efforts, marketing efforts, if you will. So, yeah, putting their name and their brand on the products was something we did early on. I think to your point, making it a team uh, issued product so that everyone had one. I mean, parents all universally want their kids in headgear. We've never found parents that don't, but they also don't want to be the only kid on the field wearing, the headgear. And so we recognized that early. We actually had a young lady who had multiple scholarship offers, told that she had to quit playing lacrosse because of these injuries. And her mom reached out to us. And I remember, overnighting a headgear. And I said to the mom, send me your artwork. Let's make it part of the uniform. And it'll be much better, well received by her. And we did. And she tried it on and loved it. And she went to practice the next day. And the mom called the next day and asked me if she could return it. And I said, it's okay. You could just keep it. Don't worry about returning it. Maybe she'll change her mind. And she said, she's just really embarrassed. She still feels very ostracized. And I said, I get it. And it takes a different kind of person to be able to, handle that. And she's a young lady and I totally appreciate her concerns. And, I wished her the best. And about a week later, the school called and ordered them for every kid on the team. And the athletic director called me and said, I'll be damned if I'm going to lose my best player because she's embarrassed to wear a headgear. We're all wear them. And so we outfitted the team, and that team became like the most photographed high school women's lacrosse team in the country, and ultimately led to the mandate in Florida for, women's lacrosse helmets. And so, yeah, it's been, those kind of breakthroughs are real exciting, and certainly putting the logos on them. And I think, we made it cool early on in the 7v7 market, and we had, a lot of, rappers and professional athletes get behind the product, and it's and the belief system around it. And so that was great, and really helped with the adoption.
Sure. And, and you noted, certainly going across different sports. And that was another, I look at great entrepreneurs like yourself and say, hey, Mike got into soft shell headgear, but GameBreaker was always going to be a bigger opportunity than just one product. And then you came out with the soft shell shoulder pads. You've come out now with the sublimated jerseys or uniforms and apparel. Maybe talk a little bit about the evolution and growth that you've driven, since maybe the early days, but more recently at GameBreaker.
Yeah, well, while we started, like I said, and cut our teeth in football, certainly we knew that there was the same need in other sports, right? Rugby is going through the same thing football went through, 10, 15 years ago. They're going through it now globally. Soccer, the same. And so we saw a lot of other opportunities that either we directly, sought out and dove into, or they found us, right? I mean, I remember getting a call saying we're the number one surf helmet in the world, and could I give an interview? And I didn't even know surfers were wearing our product, right? So that's one of the rare occasions where we didn't kind of dive into the market. But yeah, we started with our full headgear. We went into soccer headbands, and then shoulder pads, soft-sided shoulder pads for days you're not in full pads again. Um, and you know, I think in 2019, Inc. magazine named us the sixth fastest growing manufacturer, something like that, and one of America's fastest growing companies, and certainly one of America's fastest growing manufacturers. And then, COVID hit and kind of put a pause on everything, as you know. And I was giving an interview with the New York Times, and they asked me, what are you going to do with your employees during this time? And I said, I don't see the point in saving a company if I can't save the people that helped me build it. So we're going to keep everybody. And I thought, in fairness, it was going to be a month or two. Certainly, I didn't know it was going to be that long. And so we had a bunch of people sitting around, playing charades. So I figured we better get them onto something. And so we pivoted really quickly into kind of where I had some expertise from my past life owning a promotional products agency. And we got a line up and started selling, fully sublimated masks and gaiters. And we went to our customer base, which was, colleges and NFL teams, and got the product out the door. And we were doing really well. And those people started saying to us, my gosh, you guys are so good at this. Why don't you do uniforms? And I had pushed back on that for a long time. I just, getting out of bed to sell 25 pieces really didn't seem that exciting, right? And I'd been in a business where, our top 5 customers, people like Health Net and Nestle and Sunkist and Amgen were buying hundreds of thousands of pieces from me. And that's the kind of orders I was used to when it came to decorated apparel. So didn't really get me excited. And then it was just an overwhelming demand from the end user saying, hey, the people that are in this space aren't doing a really good job. You guys seem incredible. Why don't you do it? So we spent the remainder of COVID kind of building out a digital platform that we thought was, truly unique and revolutionary. And we took it to market at the end of COVID. And it's an online uniform platform that allows, it's got a great user interface where customers interface directly through a chat feature with designers, customer service, and super fast turnaround, high quality goods, really easy to order, full transparency. Anyway, it's been really successful for us and got us, into the uniform space. And now that segment of our business is kind of blown up as well. So, yeah, I've been super blessed. We have a bunch of people here that really, believe in the mission and keep our customers at the forefront of everything that they do, and just keep building the team, and adding more people that care, and the company keeps growing at rapid pace.
And and I'm sure you see the just like your business has evolved. Some of the different sports have evolved as well. And I look at flag football and say, man, just in the past 3 years, flag football has continued to explode, and more so. It started off where NFL flag was really like that was kind of flag football. That was the big brand, but at least in my eyes, NFL flag has become more of the rec side of flag football, and then you're starting to see all of these club-based groups. So it's kind of following soccer's path, right? As you look at how soccer really probably in the '80s was all about kind of rec, and then at some point maybe late '90s, early 2000s, it really the club side exploded. But it took a number of years, whereas flag football has accelerated. So it was like, hey, it's the biggest, it's fastest growing sport in America, but it was all kind of rec. And now all of a sudden, 3 years later, it is like, to me, I go out to these travel flag football tournaments and you see all of these different club teams with their sublimated jerseys, and like, they're not NFL flag, they're, whatever their own, product brand are. So to me, it's like that is a really interesting space because it's new. It aligns well with GameBreaker and clearly the soft shell side, but also that I'm sure there's a big need for sublimated uniforms on the club flag football side.
Oh yeah, I mean, we're a head to toe solution in that space, from custom footballs to custom flag belts to the uniforms to the headgear, and that space is exploding. But I would add, Garrett, that it kind of goes back to kind of the original purpose of our company. Like you said, flag football has exploded the last few years, both in the boys and girls side. Um, and you hear this quite a bit, that it's the fastest growing sport. And, you know, I remind people almost daily that, flag football has been around for 100 years. Right. And so what's driving it? Right. What's driving that growth? And I think if you look to when that growth started, you will find that the hysteria around head injuries and tackle football were at its height, right? And so I tell people a lot that, before you break your arm patting yourself on the back, that you're the greatest operator in the world. And, everyone is playing flag football because you offer it a different way or a better way than your predecessor or the guy across town or across the country. um, People aren't running to flag football. They're running from tackle, right? And we've been able to differentiate flag leagues by offering them headgear. And those leagues that offer our headgear grow disproportionately to leagues that don't. And so we've kind of proven that out, that, if you offer that head protection, you're going to attract those families that specifically are avoiding tackle for a certain amount of time until their child reaches an age that they think is appropriate. That's different for every family, right? Um, and here in LA, where our headquarters are, we have a couple of local guys that are ex-NFL players that drive past, two leagues to get to a league that mandates headgear, right? They certainly have an understanding of the game and the sport and the risk inherently. And if they're going to have their kids not play tackle and play flag, certainly they're going to make sure they're doing it in an environment that's, an operator that's created a culture of player safety. So I think it all goes back to, the well-being again of the athlete. And I think, again, if we focus on that always and first, I think these solutions kind of jump out and become pretty apparent. But yeah, we are on the other side from the uniform standpoint. and the club space and flag football. I mean, we have a lot of people coming into the space. Certainly, private equity has jumped into sport in general, but in a big way into flag football. We have some incredible partners and incredible customers that we work with that are just doing a fabulous job with, promoting the game, finding sponsors for the game, bringing in collaborators and partners, whether that's NFL teams or big brands, and bringing product to it, and just doing a spectacular job. And so that's really changed things as well. I mean, groups like Unrivaled, obviously, Blitzer and Harris and that PE firm, and they acquired a league, and we do a top to bottom solution for them, and it's amazing to see what they're doing within the sport, and there's many others similar to them that are doing the same thing.
All right. Well, hey, if you're just tuning in, you're listening to Sponsorable, the podcast about the business side of grassroots sports. We're here with CEO of GameBreaker, Mike Juels. So make sure you like and subscribe so you can continue to get great content from us here at Sponsorable. And Mike, you noted, certainly the NFL players that are big supporters of GameBreaker, as well as some other notes about strategic partners and key partners. Maybe talk a little bit about developing that influencer network and or some of the strategic partnerships that you have in place.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's about relationships, and it's about people, and doing the right thing, and having long lasting relationships. We're blessed that we have a lot of contacts, whether it's at the NFL level or the collegiate level, that work alongside of us in different forms and fashions. We do some really special things. We just had a camp a few weeks ago. I think we had 70, NCAA and NFL coaches attend, free camp for athletes. We brought in the best 75 high school quarterbacks in the country. Friday night we took all the coaches to the Hollywood Bowl to see Willie Nelson, and then Saturday we did classroom and on field, and really to allow these athletes to sit in rows with NFL head coaches, NFL coordinators, NFL position coaches, and really get a level of education that they're not used to getting. We do a special teams camp that is free locally. We get colleges, USC, UCLA, to show up to the camp, not to lead the camp, but to attend, because we get some great NFL coaches to do that camp as a free service. And so we do a lot of interactions there. I'm lucky that I get to spend a lot of time on the golf courses with them as well, and make sure we develop those relationships. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, it really takes everybody. You have to have what do they say? It takes a village, right? So it's player based, it's current players, it's ex players. And if you came to our facility, our headquarters here, it's a combination of, ESPN and maybe Barstool, right? We've got, fun and games all over the place, and people like to show up here, and it's a pretty active place where former and current players stop in all the time. And, just kind of creating an ecosystem where, we stay high touch, high visibility, and remind them of the responsibility they have to the game, right? And promoting it properly, and making sure that kids are continuing to participate. I mean, ultimately, Garrett, believe it or not, we're a participation agency. I mean, when we got into this space, football was going the other direction, and we felt like if we could teach coaches how to practice safely, that we could add a lot more players to their to the team and their roster, and help revitalize the game and increase their participation. And so that's how we look at ourselves, and we just want more kids playing, and more kids playing safely, of course.
Sure. And as you noted earlier, the probably the trigger point for a lot of kids wearing the headgear is getting their leagues and organizations to basically mandate it. And I've got 3 kids. They're no different. Like trying to get my son to wear a soft shell helmet when he's the only one is really hard, right? Because he comes back and says, "I'm the only kid that's wearing this headgear." So I do see it as such an important, like as a league director, it is such an important role that you say, "Hey, we do need to take safety seriously," and this is a proof. Like I look at if the Texas high school coaches are saying, "Hey, we're going to mandate the use of headgear," it's silly to think that the local flag football league doesn't do it. What what is the pushback that you get from local leagues when it comes to mandating that the headgear?
I think like anything else, right? If you have a problem and you follow the trail, it usually leads to, dollars, right? And so I think that's the biggest pushback is most of these leagues are independently owned and operated, if it's on the club 7-on-7 or on the flag side. And so that's how they make a living. And they look at it as taking dollars out of their pocket that those people could possibly spend there. That's part of it. I think it's an understanding. I mean, often we'll go to a league, I remember early on here in Southern California, we would, go to a league of youth kids, and those coaches were the hardest to flip. I can flip, Sean Payton or, you know, Tom Landry, but I mean, when you're talking to this youth coach, I mean, he's, living vicariously and thinks the game is something other than what it really is. And so those are the hardest guys to, get to make a change. And, he would say, well, I don't think my kid needs it. A lot of people refer to the gladiator effect, right? If I put a helmet, they're going to go harder, which is one that's always kind of made me laugh. There's been hundreds of studies in and around the gladiator effect. There's not one study ever that's come back and said that, adding safety equipment made people play harder or more reckless. But there's hundreds of studies that say, the exact opposite, right? That those findings aren't correct. And I would always comment that if that was the case, we should sell it as a recruitment tool, not as a safety item, because we can magically get your kid to find a gear that, he didn't already have. And so I think it's hard at that level, and we'll end up talking to the kids and the parents, and we'll tell the kid, well, where do you want to go to high school? And if it's in Southern California, he's going to say, Mater Dei or St. John Bosco or Oaks Christian. And we go, well, when you get there, you're going to be wearing this almost every day, right? January through August. And then we say, well, where do you want to go to college, son? And he'll say, USC, UCLA, Stanford, Oregon. And we say, well, when you get there, you're going to be wearing this again, because they wear our stuff every day, right? And then they're like, and what's your favorite NFL team? And they say, oh, the Los Angeles Rams. Well, if you make it there, guess what? You're going to be wearing it again. So I think kind of that trickle down and educating them, and then kind of explaining to the parents that or to the operators, the importance. I think the biggest thing is they think if they mandate the helmet, they're going to lose some participation, that people aren't going to play. And we always point them to our customer base and say, we'll give you our customer list, pick anyone you want. I think they'll all tell you the opposite is true, right? That they've grown because of it. But more importantly, whether they grow or don't grow, it's a responsibility. And I think that's kind of the way we talk to people. I mean, it's a requirement. It's something that you have to do. In my mind, if you want to be in and around children, that their well-being has to be first. And, I hear a lot of, I do this. It's all about the kids. It's all about the kids. Well, I definitely make them prove it. Right. And so, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I look at my son's experience in lacrosse, and for those that aren't aware, like lacrosse is a helmet, shoulder pads sport, or boys lacrosse is, but he loves it. Like he loves the fact that he gets to put on equipment, and I don't believe that the majority of kids would push back. I think it's going to be more of the adults, which to me is typically like an uneducated viewpoint, because I mean, you got kids going, so fast over the middle, like, defensive backs coming in to make a play, and man, you see collisions all the time on the flag football field. So I sit there and say, if a league director mandates it, everybody's going to fall in line. And the price point for a soft shell helmet is approximately what, Mike?
Yeah, $50.
$50, right? And it's $50.
Cheapest piece of equipment. It's the cheapest piece of equipment they will own.
Oh,
Cheaper than
100%.
the
I just bought my son his lacrosse equipment, and I mean, it was $350. Like, and as you know, and my guess is that $50, soft shell helmet is going to last probably a couple of years, right? It's right. They don't outgrow it very quickly. And from a safety standpoint as well, is Virginia Tech still the group that does the helmet ratings, or is that changed?
No, they still do it. We use several different testing facilities around the world. Virginia Tech certainly is one of them. University of Canterbury we use down in New Zealand. We have a lab in London that we use, and some others in the U.S. So just depending on what kind of project we're working on and what kind of biomechanical need we have, depending on the sport, we might obviously we're at University of Canterbury because their biomechanical lab specializes on the rugby side, so we're there. Virginia Tech here in the U.S. is kind of the gold standard, if you will. The, and
they
all
test, yeah. And what is it that they act, just so that folks that aren't maybe as familiar with like the Virginia Tech helmets testing, like they test hard shell, they test soft shell, and what do they do?
Yeah, I mean, bicycle, lacrosse, soccer, football, a myriad of hockey, a myriad of sports and products in and around head protection. And typically what Virginia Tech does is there will be a standard that's set by NOXI, or typically NOXI. And then once you pass the standard, Virginia Tech will take that grouping of products that have passed the standard and then test them and rate them 5 stars to 0 stars. And then they only recommend that you wear a 4 or a 5-star product. And so they've taken the standard and then kind of said, here's the best and the worst of what actually meets this standard. So there's nothing that we sell that's not 5-star rated, whether it's our soccer products, our football products. We're kind of at the top of that list. Unfortunately, as it relates to soft shell headgear, there is no standard, so to speak, right? That NOXI has set. And so anything that you send to Virginia Tech labeled, 7-on-7 or flag, they will test, right? And that's really not what is used in the game. Standards have kind of been set by the operators around the country, and those standards have been standardized by association. So typically, for flag and 7-on-7 or non-padded practice days, the standard is 90% head coverage, no hard plastic or metal component parts, nothing that could obviously injure another player or an unhelmeted player. A 4 or 5-star safety rating, $10 million worth of, product liability insurance, et cetera, et cetera. So, but Virginia Tech, you can go there. Certainly would be the place I would start if I was in that market, to purchase a product and make sure that it was at least 4 or 5-star rated. And then I think do your homework after that, because there's a lot of other considerations.
So the science is there to support it, and it really just ultimately it's the likely it's the education of the league director, and then ultimately that league director's got to take a stand and say, hey, we're going to do this. Just like my kids' flag football league mandates mouth guards, and you want to talk about expense, man. I think I've spent $150 on mouth guards over the last year, because each mouth guard is now like $25. So I no longer can buy the expense issue for especially as the popularity of flag football has continued to grow. I think it is that these league directors just have to stand up and say, hey, we're going to take a stand and we're going to do something for the betterment, because the kids won't just wear. You're not going to buy one-offs and wear it in a league. The only folks that are going to wear it is if it's mandated by the league. So all players are wearing it.
Yeah, and it's to your point, Garrett, it's always welcomed. The families always welcome it. The kids welcome it. It's really these operators that kind of get in the way, and the ones that don't get in the way, that do the right thing and do right by their athletes. Those are the ones that are prospering. So it's ironic, kind of little twist. But to your point, we will talk to league operators, and they'll say, well, we're not in contact. And I'm like, but you mandate mouthpieces. And they say, well, that's just in case. And I'm like, just in case what? Like, well, in case someone, they bang heads. And I'm like, well, for what it's worth, I can give you my sister's card. She's a dentist, and she can fix your teeth. She can replace your teeth. There's a lot of things you can do with your teeth. Your brain, this, you get one go at this. Like, it's kind of funny. There's a lot of leagues out there that mandate mouthpieces, but not headgear. Very confusing.
Yeah. Well, Mike, for those who want to get in touch with you or want to get in touch with GameBreaker, what's the best way for them to do that?
I think probably just, go to GameBreaker.com. All of our products are listed there. I think you can reach out through there or be put in touch with, one of our associates, and they're all over the country and now popping up all over the world. So, you can reach us there, and we have someone local that can service you and help you and walk you through all of the testing and all of the different products and all of the different options. And we're here and willing and happy to help everyone.
And I'll end with this, and it's more of a open-ended question for you. Obviously, as a master entrepreneur, somebody who's started multiple businesses and had great success, a lot of younger entrepreneurs, are listening in. What advice would you give an entrepreneur thinking about, launching or building a business?
Wow. Yeah. I think I used to say, Garrett, for a long time, that happiness at a job was two sides of the same coin, right? That you could make a good living, and that was one side, and the other side was that you enjoyed what you're doing. And when I got into this business, I realized that, there's a third side to that coin. And that third side of that coin is that you can do well by doing good, right? I think if you have all three of those things, you have the hat trick. So I would first tell people that, forget about work-life balance, that, when you're an entrepreneur, there's no such thing. And that it has to be something that you profoundly care about, and it has to be something that you genuinely love to do. It has to have purpose, or you're just not going to be able to find the fuel to put in the tank, right? People see my life and they go, my gosh, you're so lucky. This owning your own business is great. And I always say, yeah, it's great. I sleep like a baby. I wake up crying every 3 hours, right? So, find something that you love to do, something that's purpose driven, something that is going to leave a mark on the world and leave it in a better place than you found it, so that you're able to give it the passion and drive that it really needs, and then, outwork everyone. There's no, shortcuts to any place you want to be. And then at the end of the day, I think it's just do the right thing. I mean, I think we say a lot here around the office, like, do the right thing. Don't focus on being right, and too many times we focus on just being right, and leads to these arguments and, contests of, people's will. And, it doesn't make any sense. Just do the right thing.
Beautiful. Mike, hey, thanks for coming on to Sponsorable. Mike Juels, CEO, GameBreaker.
Thank you, Garrett. I appreciate it.